Cancer is one of the toughest illnesses any human being can deal with. My guest today is a two-time cancer survivor and also a man of God. Had opportunity to speak with him behind stage, and he's here to tell us about his story. My guest today is Mr. Ben Cooper. Can't wait for us to get into this episode. Mr. Ben Cooper, thank you so much for joining me on the Overcoming Adversity podcast. It's an honor to have you here, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Ben, let's hop straight into it, man. You're a two-time cancer survivor. No one asked for that. No one calls for that. But you are one person that has actually walked that road and survived it twice. Can you tell us what was these cancer occurrences and what was that like going through for you?
Well, right now I'm sitting at 21 and 6 years cancer free, but that also means I'm also in remission because you just never know when the next shoe is going to drop. So you don't want it once, you definitely want it twice, but only by God's blessing that just a quick note and when that happens, I knew something was wrong because I was getting a blood clot come out of this nose on my left side and out of my nose every morning when I got up, and I had just a little blood clot come out. So I thought, how in the world am I going to deal with this? And luckily, as God opened the doors previous, that my professional work and my professional job allowed me to have contact with an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And I just called his office up and I said, I need to see you. And he had this like mile long list, Michael, about like the number of people that you got waiting to be on your podcast. But when I dropped my name and he said, I'll see you tomorrow. He made a way for me to come in early. And that just started a snowball of bad reports with tests and stuff. It seemed like every corner or junction I came to, my wife and I came to, it was like worst case scenario. So I actually had a rhinectomy. I had to have my nose partway peeled off. I had a cut from one ear to the top of my head to the other ear, and that skin peeled off, my forehead cut and removed. They lifted my brain and went through the nose and into the brain to get rid of the cancer cells that were there. They rebuilt and cut out and rebuilt bone graft a third of my eye socket, my left eye. And so 10 and a half hours of surgery, and that was pretty overwhelming. That first cancer was definitely life-threatening. I had a 35% chance of surviving the surgery, just surviving the surgery. And so that's a lot to swallow. We just had our fifth child only months before I had the surgery. And so a father of five kids, what's happening next? But part of my story, that's like the Paul Harvey, the rest of the story someday. But the most peaceful night's rest, Michael, I had was the night before that surgery, because I knew that I rested not in my own merit, but in God teaching the doctors and the medical staff, and ultimately in God's hands. I was in God's hands. If I was going home to see the Lord in a few hours, or if I was coming back, it didn't matter, because there was nothing I could do. Men try to handle all the situations themselves, and they think, I got this. Well, Michael, I didn't have it. God had it.
Yes, he did. we always often say like God works in mysterious ways, and obviously He worked a miracle on you. I think about what you said. What really caught me was how many times that I've called the doctor and things like that, and they got to put you on your schedule and try to meet that schedule. But for you, you didn't let any shadow of a doubt or anything like that. You just called this person out, and obviously they said, "Tomorrow I'll see you." That also speaks to towards you in regards to the relationship that you keep with people, in regards for them to go in leaps and bounds for you.
Appreciate that. And you've probably heard someone say, God never gives you anything more than you can handle. Well, I'm going to disagree with that because I couldn't handle cancer. God never allows you to go through anything that He doesn't already have control of.
That's
So
true.
that's a better way to say that.
That's true.
And that cancer was followed by 130 radiation treatments to my face. And you know what? I tell people I was thankful for many different things. I was thankful, Michael, that I had cancer. That doesn't make sense, especially maybe to a non believer. But what parent or spouse wouldn't wish the cancer be on you rather than your newborn child or any of your other children or your spouse? So, my therapy in that first cancer, my therapy was thank you, Lord, that it's on me because I wouldn't be able to handle it if I was having to deal with a situation out of my control if it was one of my kids or my wife. And so I used that as my therapy. And after we hit 5 years cancer free, you think, man, that's behind me. I'm good. I'm ready to go. And then a few years later, I got nailed with a high PSA count. And for men, that puts a trigger to prostate cancer. And I had to go through it all over again. The sad part was from the time of diagnosis, the second cancer, to surgery was 3.5 months. That's an eternity. And I know that I would fixate on worry and fret and being consumed with anxiety. Is this cancer growing? Why can't they get it out of me right now? And so 3 days after that cancer diagnosis, I had my own pity party. I felt sorry for myself, and I thought, you know what? As these words were coming out of my mouth, I kind of stopped in mid. I said, why can't somebody else? And then, you know what? You don't want to wish cancer on your worst enemy because it's nasty. It affects everybody. And I caught myself up short saying, I don't want to wish cancer on somebody else. The truth is, cancer is a non discriminatory disease. Children, old people, everybody in between, it doesn't matter, male, female, whatever, it's going to attack and it's nasty. There's nothing good about it. But God can take the mess that we have in our lives and make a message out of it. And that's what He did with me. So 3 days afterwards, I started to write a book that I wanted to write years ago. And now, instead of at that time, every time I started to even get an inkling of worrying about what the doctors were going to do, what my life was going to be like, what's this going to affect, am I going to live through yet another cancer? I forgot about all that. I picked up a paper, a pen, and I started writing. And that writing was my second therapy. It was a tool that I used and allowed me. He reminded me, hey, I want you to write this book that you you started on years ago. And it took my second diagnosis to focus on it with
So you mentioned something pretty significant that I wanted to touch on. You know, cancer not just affects one person, it affects our families. And you had to go through that twice. Can you talk a little bit about the support or the emotions go through and that your kids had to go through during this particular moment?
My first cancer, um, this is good. I used humor a lot in it around my kids, especially because they didn't know what to expect. And I did some things that probably traditionally you wouldn't.
Mhm.
Since I explained a little bit about where they were going to cut and put, basically remove some things from me, and a cut across the top of my head from one ear to the top to the other. And I was going to come back from cancer surgery with a reverse opposite mohawk. Um, Opposite of Mr. T, and that's not going to look cool. And so the only control I had was, how can I acclimate my kids to prepare for me coming back from the hospital?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was worried about. I didn't want them to be afraid of me. Sad part is having a baby and then going through radiation treatments. The doctor said, because I'm radiated, I had to stay away from that newborn child as much as possible. Don't spend so much time. The sad part is I had to spend 3 hours away. I left Monday, came back on Friday, and I spent 3 hours away from home where the radiation was taking place. But 2 weeks prior to that surgery, I took a pair of clippers and I shaved my head completely bald. So when I came home, I had 43 staples across the top of my head, but I was just as bald as when I left. So it wasn't as much of a shock to my kids. And that's how I helped prepare. If you don't have any control, um, uh, you only manage. Maybe I overcompensated with the other control. My wife wasn't too proud or happy about that, but I said, you know what, this is what I got to do. I got to do something, and it helped because my kids saw me without hair on my head prior to going to the surgery. They weren't there except for the young infant. They weren't down there. My wife's sister took care of the other 4 kids, and people started hopping on. People will say, "Well, if you need anything, let me know." Well, the truth is, people going through that, they'll never let anybody know. But people offered and stepped up. There's people that prayed for me, fasted for me the day that I don't even know and never met.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people from 4 different continents praying for me the day of surgery. And God showed up with his people, his hands and feet of people I never even knew, because prayer circles started going around, and they started including me.
So I wanted to touch on another thing that you mentioned when it comes to cancer. So your second stint with cancer, you talked about like your PSA being super high, and that really hit home for me as my dad was facing the same thing about 2 months ago. And within my family, we started talking about, you know, taking these types of tests and prostate cancer and things like that a lot more serious, and a lot of things around our health. One of the biggest conversations and concerns that we had was, is this something that is hereditary, where like it's going to be within our family and things like that? So I wanted to ask you, based off someone that has survived 2 stints of cancer, was that a conversation with you and your family or for your kids, as in any worry or any fear or any anxiety around that, where they're thinking that, is this something that's going to be passed down to our kids?
Yeah, and it is hereditary, and depending on where you live on the planet, uh, has a lot to do with it too.
Oh, really?
People in people in Asia are less likely. Men in Asia are less likely to have prostate cancer. It is hereditary, but it also is in your diet as well. Us fast food Americans eat stuff that is a problem. But here, going back to comparing the first cancer and the second cancer, the first cancer, everybody, when you get cancer, well, what stage is it?
Hmm.
What stage is it?
Hmm.
And for me, it was like 3.9. When it's 4, that means it's invaded another organ in your body.
Hmm.
It was into some bone. That's why they had to do the eye surgery, eye socket, but it didn't go into another organ. So I was as close to stage 4 as you can, and the higher the number in the stage, the worse severity of cancer is. So I was like teetering on the edge of, if I didn't have that taken care of real quick, it was going to jump to get in my adeno glands or something like that. The second, prostate cancer, you don't ask what stage is it. There's scores that you have. So you compare Gleason scores and other stuff, and my PSA numbers. They're all indicators. Just because you have a high PSA number doesn't mean you have prostate cancer, because a kidney stone can do that as well.
Mhm.
But my dad had prostate cancer in his 70s. That means that any of his male sons have a higher chance of having prostate cancer at an earlier age. And so that's the way the statistics are in the United States. And so um, it's just easy to have blood tests done every so often. And mine weren't so high. It's just that they were jumping and climbing. Every 3 months, they were climbing by 3, 4, 5 numbers. And so they said, we need to take care of this right away. So hereditary, the way you eat, and where you live are the 3 main factors.
Wow. So you've often touched on your faith in regards to going through these adversities and these challenges. And you've developed a resilient mindset where you're going to put your trust and faith in God. Can you talk a little bit about your faith and just how much uh, how much support that you have with all of these prayer warriors around the world?
Um, it's funny how God works. I had just got done teaching uh, adult Sunday school class at our through the book of James. And
Hmm.
in the book of James, um, there's a verse in there that asks you, elders of the church, to pray. And our small little, it's like a an old country church, but it's in the city limits. And it's, we sing the old hymns, we sing some of the newer stuff now, but sing the old hymns out of the book, and every done pretty much the same way. And I just got done the book of James, and I asked the other men for prayer. And I said, I remember prior to knowing even I had cancer, I said, how come our church never does this? How come we have people that are sick all the time? How come nobody ever has come and said, would you lay hands and pray on me or pray for me? And so guess who was the first one that did that? In my knowledge and my understanding, that was me, Michael. And I said, I had to put my faith in action real quick. Within a 2 or 3 month period, I had to put my faith in action, say, I asked that question to our church. And so it was followed through with me. And we've done that since then. We've had several since then. So that's just one portion of it. And my faith has grown because comfortable prior to surgery, that 10.5 hour surgery, my pastor came, Esther at the time came that 3 hour trip, and came with his wife, and he prayed for them, giving me that knockout. But as he started praying, the surgeon was on me as well. That of
Oh, that's amazing, man.
knowing that you're smack dab in the center. I was where I needed to be, and it didn't matter what the outcome was. Yeah, it mattered to my wife and my kids, but to me, outcome was when that doctor that's laid hands on me, and as well, that was that sealed the deal, and it didn't matter. I'm comfortable, and I would be.
So I ask everyone this question that I know have either been through cancer or been through something serious that you've been through. Being someone that has survived that, how do you look at life now? How do you see like the beautifulness in regards to like knowing you were in one situation which you could have been in, and now you live in this life where you had another chance.
So if you remember when we first hooked up before we even went on to recording, Michael, you asked me how you doing, and I responded, I'm living the dream. And that's how I answer every time I've asked that question, because every day is a gift from God, every day. And it allows me to recognize it. And so if every day is a gift, then what am I giving back to God in the course of that day? So anytime, so prior to cancer, I'd say, yeah, I'm doing okay, Michael. How are you? No, I say every time somebody asks me that question, I say I'm living the dream. And if somebody pursues it, it may open the door to say, well, how can you be living in a dream or living the dream in the way the world is in chaos right now? And I say, because I can lead that in, because I have a personal relationship with the creator of the universe. He knows my name. And let me tell you a story about how he preserved me, not once, but twice, and probably more times than that if I really got down and wrote them all out.
So I love the fact that you're living the dream and you're someone that could tell your story and allow it to be a testimony. I wanted to ask though, how do you prioritize taking care of Ben now, knowing that you're living the dream and you had opportunities now to see like what life is like. How do you prioritize like your self-care and taking care of number one yourself, and just making sure that your knowledge and your wisdom is being poured out into your family and into your community and things like that?
As a Christian and as a believer, after cancer, especially the second time, I had the opportunity to retire at an earlier age than most people do. At the age of 57, I had 32 years in working for a state Department of Agriculture. And I liked the job because I worked with farmers and landowners. Didn't like the government side of it because they always messed with things and made it difficult. But part of my job was going out and walking around and helping farmers on the land. And that was beneficial. I like that part, but I got to retire early at 57. Most people don't get that opportunity, but I retired 2 months before my first book came out. That allowed me to market my book, my devotional, and um, I thought I was going to write one book and be done, but someone else encouraged me. Someone said, go to a writer's conference. They said, write some children's books. And I did. And I've got two of them published. I started writing for Guidepost Publications, some devotions. So it's opened up such a door that, it's hard to believe that as prideful as we are as men to be the breadwinner and bring the bacon home. Stepping away from work was one of the best things that I did because it meant that I wasn't working for the little man, capital or little M. I was working for the man, capital G, for God, and opened up the door that allowed me to do a lot of different things. I was just asked this morning because of a program that, or an opportunity I had in June from a pastor and his wife in Pakistan. Would I help lead a study? Because I did that in June. From 1 to 2 o'clock in the morning, I was leading a Bible study live online through Zoom. If I was working, I said, I can't do that because I need to sleep, because God's opened up the doors through adversity. And that doesn't make sense to us. But through adversity, he's opened up the doors, allowed me to retire early, allowed me to write, allowed me to go out and speak and share my testimony and share not just me, but share how God used this vessel in his glory, and to share it with people. So I'm still living a dream, Michael, every day, living a dream.
So I love the opportunities that has opened up for you, because there's so much people that's out there waiting to hear the story. And for you to get up at 2 in the morning to get out there and do something like that, that speaks towards what what is motivating you and empowering you to just get out here and serve. So I'm someone that has been through some things and some adversities, and I talk more particularly when I was in Iraq and I came and I got blown up and things like that, and knowing that I was close to 10 seconds from getting blown off this earth. And once I was able to understand that and really, really, really understand like that I could not be here, and I had to take full advantage of that. I decided to put that into writing, and you decided to start putting your stories into writing. Can you talk a little bit about, you're on 8 books now. So can you talk a little bit about the stories that you're talking about? Who are the people that you're looking for to like pick up the books that you've written, and some of the stories that are within inside of your book? Because going on 8 books now speaks a lot to all of your knowledge, all of your wisdom that you're trying to pour into people and help people with.
Well, the first book was a book prior to cancer that I wanted to write about animals in the Bible, a devotional about animals in the Bible. My wife homeschooled all 5 of our children from kindergarten through 12th grade, and I wanted them to hear some of the stories. And a lot of the animals that I wrote about, I actually had firsthand experience with growing up on a farm, working for while I was going to college with a degree in agriculture at Penn State, and then an internship that I did on an international livestock ranch in Arkansas exposed me to a lot of different things. I even have had the chance to work with elephants and water buffalo before, that not even around here. So just my work experience and my passion. If I could have chose a profession, I would have been a veterinarian, but I didn't have a perfect grade point average or an unlimited amount of money that it takes to be a vet. But um, I just took my experiences with those animals and wrote that first book. And then someone said, why don't you turn that into a children's series book? And so I did. And I have a children's series. And then I wanted to write. I write for All God's Creatures Guidepost publication. That's a 365-day devotional. And the third one is due to come out, is 2024 is out now for that. I've already submitted 2025, and I've write for a couple other things, but some of the other things that I've written for deal with my experience, like perfect peace the night before a 10.5-hour surgery. Only God can do that. He's opened that door for me to write. And you know what? I know it might sound cliche-ish, but everybody has a story to tell.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
Uh, and we need to buy up. You and I both know from our own life experiences that we're not guaranteed tomorrow. We're
That's
not.
right. No.
God might be in charge, but there's also this other thing, sin and death is in charge too.
Mhm.
And we're cursed with that. And so somebody else might come your way and hit you in a traffic accident and your life is gone. So buying up every opportunity and getting that near death kind of experience and surviving it, I think really pushes you over the edge of being timid and being shy and being kind of in the closet, rather than allows you to step out in the light and say, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead and tell my story. People thought I was actually in Pakistan back in June. And I said, I'm a little afraid to go to Pakistan as an American right now, because this last month, 38 churches were burned out,
Mhm.
Christian churches, because the Muslims don't want them there. And this pastor and his wife are so passionate. They fill the internet with photos of their services, and they go different places. They have a death threat on their head by the Muslims, and it's not stopping them. And you know what? What would have been, in my case, already a believer since the age of 12, but seeing my faith has to be shown in action when I go through hard times, because Christians aren't exempt from it. Um, I needed to be able to put my faith to feet or to knees and pray and act and respond within the will of God rather than anti God. And I wasn't shaking my fist to God and saying, why me? I said, why not me? What exempts me from getting cancer or somebody else? It wasn't personal. But there's a phrase I like to use, cancer doesn't define me, having it twice. But let me tell you, Michael, it sure does refine you.
Mm-hmm.
It refines you and it allows you to put priorities in place.
I wanted to touch on something. So you said you became a believer at the age of 12, and I was going to ask you if you could touch a little bit about what is it from your childhood that made you come to Jesus at such an early age? Like nowadays, it takes years for many people to do such a thing, and it makes such a brave decision. What is it that what was like your childhood like, or what made you make that decision?
Having godly parents and grandparents, growing up on a farm, seeing life and death in front of you, relying on God to bring the rains when it's needed for crops, and all that stuff was just, I tell people that prior to me being on the outside of the womb, I was going to church because my mom went to church before I was born, and it continues. At 85, she still goes to church, and there's times was in college a few months where I don't have time. I don't want to. And I felt guilty that I was robbing God of his precious time to encourage and lead me in how to live. And so it's just life. Now, just going to church doesn't make you any more a Christian than walking into that barn makes me a dairy cow. Just
Mhm.
being in the church doesn't make you anything. That commitment to follow after the footsteps of Christ, believing on what he did, dying for us, and rising again like no other, so that we might have faith in him and be and so that just the message over and over and over again. And at the age of 12, it just hit me. And oddly enough, my wife, in a totally different state, in a totally different location, at the age of 12, she accepted the Lord as well. And yeah, just uh, I think having that godly family background, that was what was more instrumental into me coming to the Lord and seeing those around me live out their faith as well.
Wow. So before we get ready to get out of here, I was thinking, aside from prostate cancer, me and my wife recently sat down and we watched a movie called DuPont, and from that story, it was things within the DuPont products that caused several people to get cancer and things like that. But they didn't find that out until like years later, based off dumping water and dumping different things inside of the uh, the community. And what I was going to ask you was, once you found out your situation with cancer, did you ever reflect on anything in regards to like how did this come about or anything like that for yourself? Not even saying it's a tribute to that, but I just thought about, you know, these people didn't find out later on until like what caused this. So did you ever look into, or did the doctors ever sit down with you and say, hey, this is this is that, in a greater detail, aside from medical things and stuff like that?
Oddly enough, with that first cancer that was more life threatening, and they both were, but way more life threatening, the oncologist I talked to during my radiation treatments, I said, can you even give me a hint of what caused this? They said, we don't even know much about that type of cancer. We just know this is a protocol to get rid of it, cut it out and radiate. And so, you know what? As much as doctors know, they don't know everything, and they weren't much of a help. There was a website that I looked at, and it was able to tell me a little bit more of adenocarcinoma that I had that affect the adeno gland in my upper sinuses. Just breathing in something that was a free radical. But here's what most cancer patients go through. They get the diagnosis. That's first. Then there's shock. I mean, it's shock. You don't even, for a half hour, I came back from the doctors from that 3-hour trip of what the neurosurgeon and the ear, nose, and throat oncologist, what they were going to do to me during this surgery. And my wife and I said nothing for 30 minutes or more. And finally, I broke the silence. I said, I never would have ever expected sitting in a doctor's office to hear a doctor say that this is what they're going to do to me or anybody else that I knew. I said, I'm just in shock. I was in shock when I got the diagnosis. Everything happened and the test and everything was okay. It could be cancer. It could maybe it's not. Well, it was cancer. Well, it could be benign or malignant. Well, it was malignant. It could be this. It could be, you might need surgery. You might not. You might need brain surgery. You might not, all these things. It kept going to the worst case scenario, which could help a person get depressed really quick and lose hope. But having that grounding in the scriptures, having that grounding in my faith in God, my hope is in the Lord. It isn't in doctors. Ultimately, it isn't in a cure for cancer. It is where it needs to be as a Christian, that God holds me safely in the palm of his hands. And if I died that night, so what? I'd be in the presence of the Lord and my cancer would have been cured either way, so I was okay with that. But so that stage of being in shock then starts to dissipate, and then you want to gather, you're a sponge gathering all the information of the type of cancer, the stage of cancer. What do I got to do? Where did it come from? And the truth is, Michael, you can't always get those answers, and so you have to accept that even doctors know. Breathing in something, just breathing in something that was tainted with a free radical. Then the final is going through the surgery and then champion that 5-year cancer free. And you think 5 years is a big milestone. I actually ran a 5K race for my anniversary of 5-year and ran a 5K and to celebrate that, back to who I was. But then the next cancer hit me, and it just knocked me off the top dead center again. So, but those stages are similar for every cancer of every person. They're shocked. They're a sponge. They want to. They're shocked. They're depressed. They're a sponge to get the information. What was it? And then you got to muscle through the recovery of that cancer.
Wow. Well, Ben, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show and sharing your story. If you can you share with us, for our listeners that may have is going through cancer, have a family member that has cancer or is dealing with cancer, what are some words of encouragement or prayer, whichever you choose, that you want to leave with us um, as we get ready to depart?
The first part of that question, if you know somebody, and everybody knows somebody going through cancer, I mean, it's that common. Don't be that person that says, hey, call me if you need anything. Make yourself available. I had one guy that, just a casual friend, after my cancer surgery for a year, called me every Monday night to see how I was doing. Those people that say they'll pray for you, but you never know for sure if they do. keep a list, start praying. When I hear somebody that is diagnosed with cancer, I sit up and take notice of that. Just as you would, Michael, if you hear somebody that's going through post traumatic stress disorder or syndrome or whatever, somebody you've lived through it, you know what that person, just go and be a friend. You don't have to say much. Just say, hey, I stop by or pick up the phone, call them, send them an email. Hey, you come across my mind. How can I pray for you today? Not just say, because 99.9% of the time, people will say, if there's anything I can do, let me know. And they never let them, the person going through it never lets them know. Just forget that step and just be active and be a friend and be a prayer warrior for that person. And the person going through it, just allow them to talk it through. If they hold everything inside, that stress, and you're less likely to make it through surgery and recovery with all that stress bottled up inside of you. Give the opportunity to let the person talk through their stress, and that is helpful as well. Ultimately, in a godly situation, your church family should be the ones, your personal family unit and your church family should be stepping up to the plate and filling that role.
That's right. So Ben, thank you so much, man. I'm just reflecting on you sharing your story and how close to home it has hit. And being a believer and seeing you here telling me your story in front of me, surviving, man, I just think that's total testament. I just want to tell you thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your story.
I'm honored to be part of it and looking forward to share it with others.
Ben, I know before we got on the mic here, you had prayed, and I really appreciated that. So before we get ready to close out the show, I'm going to ask you to do me the favor of closing out the show with a prayer of yours, sir.
Sure. Father God, we thank you for this opportunity. We pray will strike the hearts of those that need to hear it, encourage those going through a tough time, going through their own adversity, whether it be physical, financial, emotional, spiritual. We just pray, Lord, that this broadcast would reach someone that could benefit from it and know that uh, no situation is hopeless if you're involved and you're part of it, because you ultimately are our hope. Thank you for the broadcast. May you use it to glorify yourself. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Ben, if anybody wanted to speak with you, to hear your story, get a copy of your book, want to get you on a podcast, want to get you on stage to speak and tell your story, how can they get a hold of you?
Probably the easiest way is through email, but email is Cooperville. My last name, Cooper, with Ville. So it's COOPERVILLE at breezewood.net, or the links that you put on with the Facebook link that you had, my author speaker Facebook page. Either of those two is the best way to get a hold of me.
Well, thank you, Ben, for being a guest. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story, man. Thank you for your prayer. Until next time, guys, we're out of here. We love you. Peace.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, know it come and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.